So here, I've already posed my character in a fairly natural pose. You can rewatch the demo from week 1 if you need a refresher on that idea, but I didn't want to spend extra time on that in this video. Once again, this demo was about animating a simple gesture, then exaggerating it, and then pulling it back to make it more subtle. I'm going to use the gesture I showed you earlier in the lecture of myself shrugging. I like this first pose to hold for about 10 frames, so I'll set a key on frame 1 and again on frame 10. Now I'll pose the shrug gesture at about frame 28 to get us started. There are a few components to the shrug pose that gives it the shrugging sort of feel. One of those things is the sense that I'm rearing back, so I'll bend the spine backwards a little. And of course, the shoulders need to come up, as is typical for a shrug. As I set up my pose, to save myself some time, I'm grabbing both controls and manipulating them at once. And while this does save time, it can lead to a very symmetrical pose, but we can break up any symmetry later on. Along with the shoulders, the arms obviously come up to help communicate the shrug. So I'll select both of those and move them as well. And I'll go back in and tweak a few things to help break up the pose and sort of open it up toward camera. I didn't lock my camera in this example, but this is about the angle I'll be focusing on. I'll also move the root control to make sure it doesn't feel locked in place. While I won't be framing the legs in this example, I still want the legs to move slightly because we can see part of them. Similar to last week, I'm playing with my pose a bit to get a feel for something I like, although this time I actually have a plan. I'm about happy with this shrug pose, so I'll select everything and key it by hitting S. Now, I want to make sure that my curves are using auto tangent to get the smoothest interpolation between poses, so I'll hold Shift and middle mouse drag in my timeline to select my keyframes. Then I'll right-click and choose Auto from my Tangents menu. Let's scrub through to see how this is looking so far. I just want to make sure there are no strange things happening. I want to be able to play back my animation within my Maya session, so I'll make sure my playback settings are set to 24 frames per second. This is standard for film, and most often any animation advice you hear that is frame specific will be in reference to 24 frames per second. If your computer isn't fast enough to play back your animation within Maya, just render a play blast instead and check your work periodically. As I play this back, I can see that my transition is playing a little slow for a convincing shrug gesture to feel right, so I'm going to adjust my timing by sliding my shrug pose around in the timeline. After moving it, I'll play it back again to see what I get. For all of its challenges, this is a great feature of computer animation and just working with computers in general. We don't have to flip pages or use any camera equipment to play back our animation the way things are with pencil and paper.